This half hour, we're going to talk a little bit about BC Vision. You know, we do some periodic updates, try to get some notions for where things stand and the success and challenges therein. Of course, the BC Vision project is really a community-wide involvement, trying to fact find and listen and then put into action some steps to advance us in various areas here in Battle Creek. Brenda Hunt, of course, the president and CEO of the Battle Creek Community Foundation, is involved with BC Vision, and she joins us again this morning to talk about that. Brenda, good morning.
Good morning, Richard.
Thank you for the time today. You are involved in this and at the steering committee level, if I remember correctly.
That is correct, and we have a meeting coming up later this month.
So at this point, what is it that you've specifically been involved with as part of that committee?
I've sat on a couple different committees. One relates to racial equity, but the other one that's really been working quite hard, and I think a lot of people are very interested in how it's going to roll out, is the whole governance and engagement process. So folks will remember that the original steering committee was appointed. We set up some guidelines and developed some applications and really kind of what we might say advertise for people to become engaged in the whole process, but also on the steering committee. And those applications have been received, and we'll be working and doing some interviews here in the next week and making some recommendations to the steering committee on September 28th. So that's a big development. We've had some folks submit applications.
And as part of those interviews, what are you looking for?
We are really looking for people who have been involved, why people want to be engaged, and one of the very specific pieces that we're really looking to do now is perhaps, shall I say, change a little bit the makeup, the composition of the steering committee to really be some more citizens. There's a lot of people who are in positions, and that's great, such as myself, but we really want to make that blend. So I'm sure we'll be looking very closely at diversity, the breadth and depth of people's backgrounds, and, you know, we may not get everything the first time. We might not fill all the spots, but it's underway, and I think we're really moving forward with opening this process to the broader community.
Was that the original intent, or was this something that along the way we realized we were not as diverse on those committees as we wanted to be?
Well, as you probably are aware, most of our leaders in many of our positions are basically Caucasian. And so we want to make sure two things, that we have diversity in race and gender and all of those areas. But in addition to that, this process was really moving towards the community movement. And that really is coming from everyone. You know, you have to start somewhere. So I really encourage individuals who may have never run an institution but have some caring and interest in this community and really have some energy to spend to make those fill out those applications. So it's coming from the whole structure, from everybody engaged, and you'll see that in other ways as it progresses as well.
Brenda Hunt is with us in the Battle Creek Community Foundation, a partner in BC Vision, and we'll talk more about it in just a moment on WBCK. We're talking with Brenda Hunt this half hour from the Battle Creek Community Foundation about BC Vision. So what would you consider, Brenda, the most obvious ways, if an average person is checking in on this with some regularity, what are the most obvious things BC Vision has done so far collectively?
Sure. I think you're starting to see, obviously there's several studies underway, the College and Career Readiness, the NYU Plan of Action, should be done later this year. But other things, we just completed 5 opportunity fairs coming out of the workforce development. There is a 6th one this Thursday, happens to be at the Cool Center from 9 to 4. And these are new developments where really going out into the community and really wrapping your arm around the needs of the potential individual, the potential employee, and preparing them forward into a job fair setting. So a lot of action taking place there as well. I really think that the other area that you'll see some things is that small business remains very active. And the really the concept of BC Vision out asking and engaging people at events, getting their input. I think the community movement part that perhaps many were wondered, would it ever get there, has really begun. Because most of these goals, most of this energy has got to come from a broader engagement of the community. Action would be the word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked a little bit about those opportunity fairs a couple of weeks ago. I presume they were born out of a discovery phase where we realized that there's a contingent of folks who might be in need of employment but might not be prepared to engage an employer.
That is absolutely correct. I think you talked with Matt Lynn from United on those. I would agree with you. That is exactly it. We have to just think that these are the days where you put a job out there and people will come. The problems and the barriers that people face are much more involved and much more difficult than one might expect. It's taken us many years in most of these instances to get into these positions. It will take extra efforts, different approaches, more outreach, a lot of casework often to help get the individual through some things so they can be job ready.
And then the expectation would be on the other end of these that they're poised to then interview.
Exactly, and I don't mean to make this sound too easy either, because a lot of these folks are individuals who've never held employment, and then we've got folks working on other barriers that come up. Then transportation, child care, and some of those accessible points as well. So I would say that we're starting to really wrap our arms around what it's going to take to make significant impact.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about what we see in the next weeks and months with BC Vision, do you see vast movement in some areas, or are we just making steady progress?
I think steady progress, and I think that it won't always have a BC Vision title on it. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I might point to is the SNAP Child Care Organization is closing its doors, but more importantly, they're transitioning that care into the Y Center, where they were YMCA, where they were already housed. And this is years of work that really in the last year has gotten much more momentum with some of the early child care work that's taking place. So we've got great folks who worked a long time at SNAP, but it's really taking our poorest sometimes, some of our most vulnerable children, and really putting them into a larger organization where everybody gets a high-quality care. Mm-hmm. So those things really did come out of BC Vision, and a lot of good work that took place over the years. And that energy, that movement, is what I'm starting to see in this community. And I'll give BC Vision quite a bit of credit for getting us going in a prosperous direction.
Brenda Hunt's with us from the Battle Creek Community Foundation. A few more minutes with her in just a moment. With Brenda Hunt from the Battle Creek Community Foundation, we've been talking about BC Vision, but interestingly, something else that's been in the news just to our west is that proposed Kalamazoo Foundation for Excellence, which, of course, if you haven't heard, is a pooling of money, much like the Kalamazoo Promise works. But the idea was the function of it would be to create an endowment to shore up the budget in the city of Kalamazoo so that as cities have gone along, and we're going to talk more about this in the coming weeks, by the way, revenue sharing from Lansing has gone down, and so city budgets have had to be somewhat agile, and that's been difficult. This idea would help shore that up, and it's a non-conventional idea, and certainly foundations in Kalamazoo County would be a big part of that. I'm curious, Brenda, what your thoughts are about this kind of business model.
Well, congratulations to Kalamazoo. We've, got the individual philanthropists over there who, again, have stepped out with something very unusual. And if everybody's watching in the whole field of foundation, everybody's watching to see how this can work. But it does illustrate, in my mind, how the foundation or philanthropic world and government and the private sector are all becoming quite a bit more intertwined. And, there's no question about the municipalities, particularly in the state of Michigan, are under great duress, as are the individuals living in the inner cities of these communities where we have very old infrastructures, old housing stock, and we have, and we're in competition with places that are just booming and building like Grand Rapids. So I think this could be a very good approach for some cities. But, there's nobody quite like Kalamazoo, just like there's nobody quite like Battle Creek. So each community is unique, and they have these private philanthropists in Kalamazoo that we'd all like to have more of them, who step forward and done this very boldly. But there's a very good way in which government and philanthropy can work together to make stronger cities and stronger operations and infrastructures for our residents.
You're right about the fact that everybody's watching this. I was on the other side of the state for a wedding this weekend, and at the reception, sitting around the table, people hear you're from this area, and the promise comes up, and then this came up too. You're right. People from all over are watching this thing. A couple of people have said, wait a minute now. If I have millions of dollars, I could say, here, throw in a pot. Is there any kind of concern we should have for what kind of influence that brings down the road? Are there concerns there?
That will be what a lot of people are looking for, thinking, and watching. So sometimes when donors put money into certain areas, they expect certain things, or they wouldn't put it there. So there's always implied in anticipatory results. I think the other caution that I would have is that many times we're looking to the one thing that can fix it for us. We're in duress, it's uncomfortable, we want to change our conditions. And while this is a wonderful effort and something we need to watch, just like the promise was, it's not magic, and it doesn't overnight change our communities, change what's going on. That really comes with long-term good hard work by citizens and engagement and good decision-making and a broad sense of engagement and leadership in our communities, people running for office, et cetera. So while it's wonderful and it will help, there's no doubt in my mind that it's going to take a lot more work. My concern would be what the general public might think if they do end up having to raise taxes there, because they feel like it was not successful when actually it probably will have a level of a success to it. Just what level?
Right, I see. Interesting. Now, you talked about the uniqueness of communities and the uniqueness of Kalamazoo in that they do have this philanthropy that's quite obvious. Is that easy to replicate in other places like Battle Creek?
It depends on individuals who step forward, and I would say the difference between Kalamazoo and Battle Creek in this area is we have many, many caring donors that might not have as great of wealth as some individuals have in Kalamazoo.
Right.
So, for example, we just did $1 million in scholarships this year, and that does not include Legacy Scholars, which is the Kellogg Foundation's 62 credit hours for our graduates of Lakeview and Battle Creek Public Schools. $1 million. Those funds, those hundreds of funds, they came from individuals, sometimes $50 at a time, sometimes people with their estates. So we have a much broader sense of giving. Maybe the giving levels per donation are lower, but it's a much broader sense. So that's just illustrating one of the differences. And there's good parts and bad parts about both. But I just want to caution folks that, if money could fix it, we'd all be doing a lot more with how we use like our investments. It's much more difficult than that. And we really need people to take action, positive action, and engage in this.
Interesting. We'll leave it right there. Thank you, Brenda. We appreciate your time as always. Brenda Hunt, the president, CEO of the Battle Creek Community Foundation.